In a world that constantly demands our attention, where noise fills every gap, we often mistake movement for progress. We believe that if we're not speaking, if we're not acting, if we're not constantly pushing forward, then we're falling behind. But the truth is, clarity is not found in the chaos. It's found in the stillness. Think about the moments when you've had your best ideas. They don't come when you're forcing them, when you're desperately searching for an answer. They come when you're in the shower, when you're out for a walk, when you're staring out the window with no particular thought in mind. Because when the mind is quiet, when the pressure to speak or act is removed, the real answers start to surface. Silence isn't about the absence of sound. It's about the absence of distraction. It's the space where we can actually hear ourselves think, where we can differentiate between what's urgent and what's important. When we stop filling every second with words, when we stop reacting just to prove we're engaged, we give ourselves the chance to understand what really matters. Leaders who embrace silence don't make decisions based on impulse. They make them based on wisdom. They don't speak just to be heard. They speak because they have something meaningful to say. And that only happens when they take the time to reflect, to listen, to sit with their thoughts before turning them into action. When we remove the noise, when we allow space for clarity to emerge, we start to see things we couldn't see before. The answers were always there. We were just too busy making noise to notice them. We've been taught that the loudest voice in the room is the most powerful, that the person who speaks the most, who dominates the conversation, who always has something to say, is the one who leads. But true leadership, true influence, comes not from speaking, but from listening. Most people listen to respond. They're not truly absorbing what's being said. They're waiting for their turn to talk. Their mind is already formulating a reply before the other person has even finished their sentence. And in that moment, they miss something important. They miss the opportunity to understand. When we prioritize listening over speaking, we shift our focus from ourselves to the other person. We stop trying to prove how much we know and start learning what we don't. We start hearing the things that are left unsaid, the hesitation in someone's voice, the emotion behind their words, the real meaning buried beneath the surface. Great leaders, great thinkers, great innovators, none of them got to where they are by talking the most. They got there by listening, by observing, by paying attention to the things others overlooked. Because when we listen, we gain insights we never would have found on our own. We see perspectives that challenge our own beliefs. We uncover problems we didn't even know existed. The best communicators aren't the ones who always have the perfect words. They're the ones who make others feel heard. They create space for real conversations, for real connections. They know that people don't just want to be spoken to, they want to be understood. And that only happens when we stop trying to be interesting and start being interested. Listening isn't passive, it's an active skill, one that requires discipline and intention. It means resisting the urge to interrupt. It means asking better questions, ones that invite deeper thinking. It means being comfortable with silence, allowing room for someone else to gather their thoughts instead of rushing to fill the gap. The irony is, the less we speak, the more we learn. The more we listen, the more influence we gain. Because people don't follow those who talk the most, they follow those who make them feel valued. And nothing makes a person feel more valued than being truly, deeply heard. We live in a world that rewards speed, instant gratification, quick results, immediate answers. These are the things we've been conditioned to expect. If something doesn't happen fast enough, we assume it's failing. If success doesn't come quickly, we start to doubt whether it will come at all. But real power doesn't come from moving fast. It comes from knowing when to wait. Patience isn't about doing nothing. It's about understanding that some things take time, that growth isn't always visible, that just because we can't see progress doesn't mean it isn't happening. A tree doesn't sprout the moment the seed is planted. It takes root underground first, building its foundation long before it ever breaks through the surface. If we judged its progress too soon, we might assume nothing is happening at all. The most successful people, the strongest leaders, the most impactful thinkers, they all understand this. They know that rushing a process doesn't make it better, it only makes it weaker. They know that patience isn't a sign of inaction, it's a sign of wisdom. Because anything worth having, anything worth building, anything that truly lasts is never created overnight. Patience is the ability to stay calm when things don't go as planned. It's the discipline to keep going when the results aren't immediate. It's the understanding that setbacks aren't failures. They're just part of the journey. When we lack patience, we make decisions out of frustration rather than strategy. We settle for what's quick instead of what's right. And in doing so, we rob ourselves of the very thing we're chasing. We admire those who seem unshaken in the face of uncertainty, those who don't react emotionally to every challenge, those who move with a sense of confidence that isn't dependent on external validation. But that kind of confidence doesn't come from knowing all the answers right away. It comes from trusting the process, from understanding that the things that matter most take time. Patience gives us clarity. It allows us to see the bigger picture instead of getting lost in the urgency of the moment. It teaches us that progress isn't always linear, that sometimes things need to fall apart before they can come together, that sometimes waiting is the smartest move we can make. The greatest opportunities, the greatest breakthroughs, the greatest rewards, they don't come to those who chase them desperately. They come to those who understand the power of timing. We all want results. We want to see progress. We want to know that our efforts are paying off. We want the reassurance that we're on the right path. But the challenge is that real success, meaningful success, doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen in a straight line. It doesn't happen on our timeline. And that's where most people struggle. Not with the work itself, but with the uncertainty of the journey. Trusting the process means understanding that growth is happening even when we can't see it. It means having faith in the work we're doing even when the results aren't immediate. It means staying committed even when doubt starts creeping in, even when we don't have proof that everything will work out. Because the truth is, the process is what leads to success. But most people give up before they ever get there. Think about how nature works. A farmer plants seeds in the ground and doesn't dig them up every day to check if they're growing. They water them, they care for them, they trust that if they do their part, the process will take care of the rest. If they were to rush it, if they were to force the growth, they would ruin everything before it had the chance to flourish. The same applies to anything meaningful in life. The problem is, we live in a results-driven world. We're taught to measure success by immediate outcomes. If we don't see instant progress, we assume we're failing. If things don't happen as quickly as we expect, we start to question whether they will happen at all. But the people who succeed, the people who truly make an impact, understand something different. They know that results aren't what creates success. Commitment to the process is. Trusting the process doesn't mean doing nothing. It doesn't mean sitting back and hoping things will magically work out. It means showing up every day, putting in the work, staying focused, and understanding that progress is happening even if we can't see it yet. It means resisting the temptation to rush, to force, to control every little detail. It means accepting that setbacks, failures, and detours are all part of the process, not signs that we're on the wrong path. When we don't trust the process, we sabotage ourselves. We chase shortcuts. We make impulsive decisions. We quit too soon. We let frustration drive our actions instead of strategy. But when we trust the process, when we stay consistent, when we focus on what we can control and let go of what we can't, things start to unfold naturally. Some of the greatest successes in history happen not because people had everything figured out from the start, but because they kept going when others gave up. They stayed the course. They believed in the process, even when it wasn't easy, even when the odds were against them, even when there were no guarantees, because they understood that the journey itself is what shapes us, what prepares us, what ultimately leads us to where we're meant to be. We are wired to respond. When something happens, when we are challenged, when we feel attacked, our instinct is to react immediately, impulsively, emotionally. It's human nature. But the ability to resist that impulse, to pause instead of lash out, to think instead of react, is one of the most powerful skills we can develop. Most people don't think before they react. They just react. Someone criticizes them and they snap back. A situation becomes stressful and they panic. A problem arises and they rush to fix it without fully understanding it. And in doing so, they give up control, not to the situation, but to their emotions. Resisting reaction isn't about suppressing emotion. It's about mastering it. It's about recognizing that not every situation requires an immediate response, that not every comment deserves a reply, that not every problem needs to be solved in the heat of the moment. When we react impulsively, we let external forces dictate our behavior. But when we resist that reaction, when we take a step back, when we allow ourselves the space to process, we make better decisions. Think about the best leaders, the most respected thinkers, the people who seem unshaken even in the most intense situations. They don't get there by reacting to everything. They get there by observing, by listening, by choosing their response carefully. They understand that the first reaction is often not the best one, that the most effective response isn't always the fastest one, that patience, even for a few seconds, can be the difference between escalation and resolution. Emotional intelligence isn't about avoiding emotions, it's about understanding them. When we feel anger, frustration, fear, those emotions are signals, not instructions. They tell us something needs attention, but they don't tell us how to respond. That's up to us. And if we respond out of emotion rather than intention, we risk making choices we later regret. There is power in silence, in the pause between stimulus and response. It's in that space that we find clarity. When we resist reaction, we give ourselves time to gather information, to see the full picture, to ask ourselves, is this worth my energy? Is this the right time to respond? What outcome do I actually want? And more often than not, the best response isn't the one we would have given in the heat of the moment. When we react, we play by someone else's rules. When we resist reaction, we set our own. The strongest people, the most influential leaders, the ones who truly make an impact, they don't waste their energy reacting to every little thing. They know that control isn't about force. It's about discipline. It's about choosing response over reaction, strategy over impulse, patience over emotional outbursts. There will always be triggers, challenges, criticisms, unexpected setbacks. The world will always test our ability to stay calm, to stay composed, to resist the urge to react. And the ones who master that skill, the ones who understand that power doesn't come from reacting, but from responding with intention, are the ones who ultimately shape the world around them instead of letting the world shape them. Everything in life moves to a rhythm. The seasons change, the tides rise and fall, the sun sets and rises, all in perfect harmony, all in their own time. No tree forces itself to grow faster, no river rushes to reach the ocean before its time, no animal wakes up in the morning questioning whether it should follow its instincts. Nature doesn't hurry, yet everything is accomplished. But we, as humans, have forgotten this rhythm. We force, we push, we rush. We try to control the pace of everything around us, believing that faster is always better, that more is always the goal. We've been conditioned to believe that if we're not constantly moving, constantly striving, constantly achieving, then we're falling behind. But nature teaches us otherwise. Look at a tree. It doesn't grow in a straight line, nor does it grow at the same pace every day. It has seasons of rapid expansion, where its branches stretch toward the sky, and seasons of stillness, where it conserves energy, appearing dormant on the surface but strengthening its roots underground. If you judged its progress based only on what you see, you might think it had stopped growing, but real growth isn't always visible. The same applies to us. We all have our seasons. Seasons of learning, seasons of building, seasons of waiting, and seasons of thriving. But when we resist this natural rhythm, when we expect constant progress without pause, we create stress, frustration, and burnout. We start to believe that rest is wasted time, that patience is weakness, that slowing down means we're losing. But nature tells a different story. A river doesn't carve through rock by forcing its way forward. It moves with patience, following the path of least resistance, adjusting and adapting as it flows. And yet, over time, it can shape entire landscapes. Power doesn't always come from force. It often comes from consistency, from allowing things to unfold at their own pace. When we try to rush success, when we demand immediate results, when we refuse to accept the natural pace of progress, we end up exhausted, frustrated, and disconnected from the journey itself. We compare our timeline to others, forgetting that every tree grows at its own speed, that every river follows its own course, that every season serves its purpose. Nature teaches us that timing is everything, that no matter how much we want to control the outcome, there are things that simply cannot be rushed. A flower that blooms too early will wither before its time. A fruit picked before it's ripe will never taste as sweet. Growth, transformation, success, it all happens when it's meant to, not when we force it. When we align ourselves with nature's rhythm, when we embrace the cycles of growth and stillness, of movement and rest, of patience and persistence, we find a sense of peace that cannot be found in the frantic pursuit of more. We start to trust that things will unfold as they should, that just as the sun never fails to rise, just as the seasons never fail to change, the right opportunities, the right answers, the right path will reveal themselves when the time is right. Everything in life moves to a rhythm. The seasons change, the tides rise and fall, the sun sets and rises, all in perfect harmony, all in their own time. No tree forces itself to grow faster. No river rushes to reach the ocean before its time. No animal wakes up in the morning questioning whether it should follow its instincts. Nature doesn't hurry, yet everything is accomplished. But we as humans have forgotten this rhythm. We force, we push, we rush. We try to control the pace of everything around us, believing that faster is always better, that more is always the goal. We've been conditioned to believe that if we're not constantly moving, constantly striving, constantly achieving, then we're falling behind. But nature teaches us otherwise. Look at a tree. It doesn't grow in a straight line, nor does it grow at the same pace every day. It has seasons of rapid expansion, where its branches stretch toward the sky, and seasons of stillness, where it conserves energy, appearing dormant on the surface but strengthening its roots underground. If you judged its progress based only on what you see, you might think it had stopped growing. But real growth isn't always visible. The same applies to us. We all have our seasons. Seasons of learning, seasons of building, seasons of waiting, and seasons of thriving. But when we resist this natural rhythm, when we expect constant progress without pause, we create stress, frustration, and burnout. We start to believe that rest is wasted time, that patience is weakness, that slowing down means we're losing. But nature tells a different story. A river doesn't carve through rock by forcing its way forward. It moves with patience, following the path of least resistance, adjusting and adapting as it flows. And yet, over time, it can shape entire landscapes. Power doesn't always come from force. It often comes from consistency, from allowing things to unfold at their own pace. when we try to rush success, when we demand immediate results, when we refuse to accept the natural pace of progress, we end up exhausted, frustrated, and disconnected from the journey itself. We compare our timeline to others, forgetting that every tree grows at its own speed, that every river follows its own course, that every season serves its purpose. Nature teaches us that timing is everything, that no matter how much we want to control the outcome, there are things that simply cannot be rushed. A flower that blooms too early will wither before its time. A fruit picked before it's ripe will never taste as sweet. Growth, transformation, success. It all happens when it's meant to, not when we force it. When we align ourselves with nature's rhythm, when we embrace the cycles of growth and stillness, of movement and rest, of patience and persistence, we find a sense of peace that cannot be found in the frantic pursuit of more. We start to trust that things will unfold as they should, that just as the sun never fails to rise, just as the seasons never fail to change, the right opportunities, the right answers, the right path will reveal themselves when the time is right. There's a common misconception that the loudest person in the room is the most influential, that the one who speaks the most, who dominates the conversation, who makes the biggest noise, is the one who leads. But real influence, real leadership isn't about volume. It's about certainty. We've all seen it. Someone who talks endlessly, filling every moment with words, yet saying nothing of real value. They confuse speaking with leading, believing that if they can just talk over everyone else, if they can be the most aggressive voice in the room, they will command respect. But that's not how leadership works. Because people don't follow those who speak the most. They follow those who know where they're going. Certainty is powerful. It's the quiet confidence of someone who doesn't need to prove themselves. It's the composure of a leader who stays grounded when everyone else panics. It's the presence of a person who doesn't waste words, but makes every word count. Think about the moments in history when people rallied behind a leader. It wasn't because that leader shouted the loudest. It was because they had a vision. They knew what they stood for. They didn't speak just to fill the silence. They spoke because they had something to say. And because of that, people listened. When a leader walks into a room, people don't follow them because they demand attention. They follow them because they radiate certainty, because they believe in something so strongly that it makes others believe too. And that kind of influence doesn't come from shouting. It comes from clarity, from conviction, from the ability to stand firm in what you know to be true. The mistake many people make is thinking that if they just talk more, if they just argue harder, if they just assert themselves louder, they'll gain influence. But all they do is create noise. And noise is easy to ignore. What's hard to ignore is a person who speaks with quiet authority, who doesn't need to raise their voice to be heard. Look at the strongest leaders, the ones who inspire, who motivate, who bring people together. They don't waste energy trying to overpower others. They don't need to. Because when you truly believe in what you're saying, when you are certain, when you are clear, people will listen. Not because you force them to, but because they want to. Certainty is what makes people trust you. It's what makes them feel safe in uncertainty. It's what makes them look to you when they don't know what to do. And that has nothing to do with how loudly you speak. It has everything to do with how confidently you stand in what you believe. In a world that constantly demands our attention, our reaction, and our voice, silence has become a lost art. But the most profound insights, the deepest understanding, and the clearest direction don't come from speaking. They come from listening, from observing, from allowing things to unfold in their own time. Silence is not inaction, it is patience. It is resisting the impulse to react, to control, to force things before their time. It is the space where clarity is born, where thoughts have room to develop, where intuition becomes louder than the noise of the world. Those who master silence don't chase, they attract. They don't force outcomes, they allow them to happen naturally. Trusting the process, embracing patience, resisting reaction, these are not signs of weakness, but of strength. Nature itself follows this rhythm, never rushing, yet never failing. The river doesn't fight to reach the ocean, yet it always gets there. The tree doesn't rush to grow, yet it becomes mighty with time. Everything happens as it should, when it should. People follow certainty, not volume. They follow those who don't feel the need to prove themselves with words, but who move with quiet confidence. The greatest leaders, the strongest minds. The most influential people are not the ones who shout the loudest, but the ones who listen, who understand, who know when to speak and when to stay silent. When you embrace silence, when you stop forcing, when you allow space for things to unfold, you will realize that the answers were always there. The opportunities, the solutions, the clarity, they come not through noise, but through stillness. Everything you seek will come to you, not when you chase it, but when you are ready to receive it.